At the age of 4, I was unexpectedly brought to the airport by my father. Little did I know that I was on my way to the University of Michigan campus for the first time ever. My memory of that trip, before we went to the football game, was kind of a blur. However, I imagine it being similar to the later trips my dad and I made to Michigan. I suspect it was full of cottage and pizza, countless hours in the M-Den, and adventures in the Arboretum. Although my recollection of my first visit to Michigan was somewhat clouded, the football game itself was unforgettable. Like any 4-year-old child would be, I was uninterested in the game at first. However, a special moment at that game showed me how powerful sports can be in connecting fans and creating eternal friendships. It was nearly 90 degrees walking to Michigan Stadium on a late September afternoon in Ann Arbor. My genius dad decided to bundle me up in heavy sweatshirts and sweatpants, putting overheated 4-year-old me in a horrible mood heading to the game. Before the game even started, I forced my dad to buy me a jersey so I could take off the clothes that were essentially baking me. Following my tantrum, we headed to our seats. My first steps into the stands were remarkable. All I saw was a sea of maize and blue. I could not understand why everyone had dressed themselves in these colors. I did not know what the congregation of these thousands of spectators in the stadium meant. However, I would later understand the purpose behind these fans' behavior, but for the moment, my questions regarding the deliberate actions of the crowd remained unanswered. My dad had managed to corral me in the stands for the entirety of the first quarter of the game. However, becoming increasingly bored, I made my dad walk me around the stadium for the duration of the second and third quarters, only going back to the seats to watch the band at halftime. My dad convinced me to return to our seats in the fourth quarter. That is when my game experience drastically changed. All of a sudden, a deafening roar consumed the big house. I had no idea what was going on. I remember asking my dad, "Why is everyone yelling?" He then explained to me what a touchdown was, 6 points awarded to a team who crossed the goal line, and that our team had just scored a touchdown. Being a toddler who loved to scream, I now took interest in the game and followed it more closely. The next time Michigan scored, I heard the sound of that familiar roar and saw players celebrating in the end zone. I then looked up at the scoreboard and saw our score had increased. At that moment, I joined the thunderous barrage of cheering, and I had never felt more connected to a network of people. My dad hoisted me in the air, and I was instinctively high-fiving Michigan fans of all stature that I had never met before. Why all these fans had gathered in the big house dressed in maize and blue was finally answered. These fans were there to support their beloved Wolverines, and their attire emulated their advocacy. Reflecting on this experience now, I realize how powerful the language of sports is in linking fans of all different backgrounds. Solely because we all shared the common passion of cheering for the Michigan football team, we were all able to celebrate and identify under the uniform title of Michigan Wolverines fans. More specifically, I became a part of a network of Michigan toddlers. Just because I understood what a touchdown was, I could hail the Wolverines with thousands of different fans. Watching sports may have the ability to connect people on a broader scale, but physically playing sports has the ability to create extraordinary friendships. The impact my experience at the Big House had on me was monumental. I became infatuated with anything that had to do with sports. My obsession with sports grew far beyond football. In the months that followed my first football game, I stumbled upon my father one day watching his treasured New York Mets. This was my first encounter with the sport of baseball, so I asked my dad almost every question imaginable about the rules of the game. My interest in baseball inspired my dad to take me outside for my first lesson. Throughout our subsequent practices, I was taught how to catch, hit, and throw a baseball. After enough drills, my father decided I was ready for t-ball. Like most junior sports at the time, t-ball is more about having fun and expanding one's knowledge of the game than being competitive and winning. However, one still needed a foundation of the rules of the game in order to participate and contribute to a team's success. The lighthearted spirit of t-ball allowed my teammates and I to get to know each other quite well. During our team's first game, many of our players, including myself, had forgotten some of the rules and received constant feedback from our coaches. After being tired of hearing the same old backlash, I rudely shouted, "Who cares?" at one of our coaches, generating plenty of laughter among my teammates. Accidentally, I started the precedent of being mean and blunt to our coaches when all they were trying to do was help us. My teammates and I continued to yell, "Who cares?" at our coaches anytime they tried to help us. We thought our snide comments were the funniest thing in the world. Despite our coaches eventually putting an end to the "Who cares" outbreak, our dugout amplified in jokes and laughter from that point on. Moments like the "Who cares" episode in the dugout are the ones that I repeatedly encountered throughout my juvenile sports career. These moments empowered my teammates and I to grow our friendships more than any practice, game, or drill ever did. Although the comments my t-ball teammates and I made were inappropriate, they allowed us to grow more comfortable around each other and make strides in our friendships. Without t-ball, there's a possibility I may never have met some of my best friends. Sports provide a platform for teammates to connect and relate to each other that sometimes goes unnoticed by the general public. Although I no longer participate on organized teams, sports are still very much an important part of my life. Almost every time I've gone to the intramural sports building here at Michigan to play basketball, I've made at least one new friend on the court. A big part of making friends is finding people who have the same interests that you do. Basketball was already the established common interest between me and my fellow teammates, making conversation very easy between us. I use my knowledge of sports every day when I check Instagram to see the latest news in sports, or when I set and monitor my fantasy football lineup for the week. Going forward, I hope to get involved in a career that suits my love for sports. I do recognize that sports are not necessarily an interest of everyone. However, I cannot imagine my life today without sports being a part of it.